There's a little known story of a secret establishment in the hills above Gilnahirk. It played a secret and vital role in the work of the code breakers based at Bletchley Park during World War II and in the Cold War that followed. George Busby has researched the story.
The story of Gilnahirk Wireless Station begins really in the 1930s, and this aspect of Northern Ireland's history was directly linked to the work of Bletchley Park, code breaking and the winning of World War II. Well, if we go back to 1920, it was by an Act of Parliament that the GPO were given the authority to both licence and police the airwaves of the United Kingdom. And this was done by civilian personnel. And at the beginning of World War II, that process continued because these were people who were trained, who were specialists, who knew what they were about. In the event of a war, it was decided that this should be, shall we say, a more robust organisation. So the Postmaster General was tasked with building 3 purpose-built radio stations to work directly to the Radio Security Service. One would be in St Erth at Cornwall, one at Thurso in the north of Scotland, and the last one in Northern Ireland. And in late 1939, a survey was conducted in the Greater Belfast area, and a suitable site was found 6 miles from the centre of Belfast, near the village of Gilnahirk, in the townland of Ballyhanwood. And work began almost immediately on this radio station. And by May of 1940, this station was now up and running, working for military intelligence. Now, in 1942, when the Allies began to plan the re-invasion of Europe, the whole organisation was militarised. The civilian element was taken out, and everyone who was now working at Gilnahirk and the other stations were indirectly employed by the War Office. The link with Bletchley Park, the reality is that when people think of Bletchley Park, they look at Bletchley Park as simply a location on the map. And although Bletchley Park achieved tremendous success, they would not have achieved that success had it not been for the supply of raw signals intelligence. And this intelligence had to be gathered, and it was gathered in various ways. Now, the Y service, or the wireless service, was divided up into 3 primary units. We had the Army, the Navy and the Royal Air Force. But the target for the Radio Security Service was the German intelligence service. So Gilnahirk, St Erth and Thurso were looking specifically at the radio transmissions of the German Adver. Now, all of this information, when you transmit a radio signal into the ether, anyone with a radio set can hear that. So you have to make that information secure, and you do that by a process of encryption. And during the war, the Germans employed 2 machines, one the Enigma and the other one the Lorentz machine, to encrypt their messages. So when the people at Gilnahirk picked up a radio transmission which was transmitted in the conventional Morse code format, that was in a code. And those log sheets which recorded these messages were then sent from Gilnahirk via teleprinter direct to Bletchley Park to be broken and read in plain language. And this process was going on all over the United Kingdom and overseas as well. So Gilnahirk was one of the centres that was capturing these messages from the ether and then passing them down the line to Bletchley Park. The question is often asked, how did 10,000 people at Bletchley Park keep a secret for well over 30 years? Well, the answer is very simple. The intelligence services have a whole series of, shall we say, classifications for information that they don't want people to know. We all know about restricted, confidential, secret, top secret, ultra secret. But one of the higher classifications, and this was applied to all of the work relating to Bletchley Park, the term VRK, very restricted knowledge. And what it means simply is that if you do not need to know, you will not be told. And it was also drummed into these people that you don't ask questions of the person next to you or in the next department, what are you doing? And they likewise did not ask questions of you. So what you had was thousands of people working for the benefit of Bletchley Park, but in reality, they didn't know exactly what they were doing. They didn't know the end product. Examples of this in my research. A gentleman, Kenneth Larkin, who lives in Hollywood, was a teleprinter operator at Gilnahirk for the GPO. And until I interviewed him, he was not aware that everything he was sending from Gilnahirk was going to Bletchley Park. He did not know that because he didn't need to know that. A number of our radio amateurs, and I'll give one example, a chap called Arthur Irwin, who lived in the townland of Ravara outside Ballygowan. He was initially recruited as a part-time listener, a VI. But in 1942, because he was an instructor in the Caledonian Wireless College at North Street in Belfast, teaching Merchant Navy radio operators, he was invited to take one of the empty seats at Gilnahirk, and this he did. So the thing that surprised me, and this really did surprise me, was the age of some of these people. Now, they talk about young and foolish cannon fodder going to war. The same could be said of these people who worked at Gilnahirk. We had people at Gilnahirk who were as young as 16, 17 and 18 years of old. Because the young mind, the good hearing, their shall we senses are much sharper. And one of the things that I came across, and I've read a number of the little discharge papers that were issued to many of these people, and the one thing that comes out over and over again, power of concentration. I want you to try and imagine listening to, say, a football commentary on a radio set. But in the background, there are other commentaries. There's music, there's static, there's voice. And you're trying to hang on to this commentary of a football match. Well, that's exactly what they were doing, and they were listening to the faint, distant signals of a Morse key tapping out a radio message. So, as one lady, and she was in the Y service, she told me there were occasions when you indirectly went into like a trance, and your pen or your pencil was writing down the letters, and everything that was going on around you was non-existent. You were focused. Tremendous powers of concentration. In January 1946, Gilnahirk, shall we say, is effectively mothballed. There's a wee bit of a mystery about this. Some people say it went to the Air Ministry, especially the DF, the Direction Finding Site, but that hasn't been proved. But basically, British intelligence and the Allies, the Americans, realised that here was a tool that could be used in peacetime. And in July of 1947, wartime Gilnahirk was, shall we say, switched on again. This time manned by civilians, but primarily ex-service civilians. People who had been involved with this work during the Second World War. So Gilnahirk continued as a listening station, as a DF site, under the management of GCHQ. And it acquired the name of Composite Signals Organisation Station Gilnahirk. But that in effect was a cover name for the work of GCHQ. Now, as the threat of World War, so Gilnahirk continued as a listening station, as a DF site, under the management of GCHQ. And it acquired the name of Composite Signals Organisation Station Gilnahirk. But that, in effect, was a cover name for the work of GCHQ. Now, as the threat from the Cold War, our Russian allies who we had stood shoulder to shoulder with during the Second War, when we fell out with them, the Cold War developed. And by the early 1950s, the need for, shall we say, a bigger, a more up-to-date station was required. And work began on, shall we say, a brand new station, station number 2, at Gilnahirk. And that station opened at some point in 1952-53. And all of the wartime structures were then, shall we say, demolished and removed, leaving only...
Let's go back to all the wartime structures.
All of the wartime structures were removed, leaving only the new post-war station. The station was manned by approximately 100 people, both male and female. The station was manned 24/7, 365 days a year. Now, the target primarily was everything communist, East European. But the intelligence tool can be used in various ways. So they were looking for anything and everything diplomatic, industrial, commercial, banking, and, believe it or not, the breaking of the law, drugs, guns, money laundering. And this goes back to the 50s and 60s. This is nothing new. And we hear today a lot about WikiLeaks and the surveillance of people. But this has been going on for years and years. And I'll bring in something else which you'll find very interesting. The Cold War continued up until 1990, but sadly, Gilnahirk closed in 1978. And it was down primarily to the advent of technology. Morse code and the radio signal had served their time. We were now into microwaves, satellite communication, and optic fibre. And Gilnahirk, along with a number of the other stations in the GCHQ listening network around the world, closed. I grew up in Gilnahirk, and I, like many others, was aware of Gilnahirk radio station. But no one knew anything about Gilnahirk radio station or what Gilnahirk radio station did. And it wasn't until I began to research this subject in 2004 that the importance of this site became obvious. Here was an extremely secret establishment. It was known only to a few. It was placed in a position where it was away from main roads. It was hidden, shall we say, in a hollow, where even people walking past couldn't see it. And the only distinguishing feature were, shall we say, a considerable number of telegraph poles, large telegraph poles, linked together in a way a bit like a spider's web. A top secret government radio listening station that played a vital part in the work of Bletchley Park and the winning of World War II.